But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. Let me tell you about my great God.
Hey guys, Pastor Tim here. Hope you guys are ready to get your day started off in God's Word. We are in Genesis chapter 3. I know it's been a while since I posted a video, just with the busyness of the holidays and such. And I know you might have experienced the same thing, but let me remind you, don't let that be an excuse or an obstacle to doing your devotions each and every day. Make sure you always set a time, because life is always going to have its busy moments. Now, I was doing my devotions, but obviously I didn't have time to post these videos. But don't worry, we're going to continue right along with the book of Genesis like we have been. Actually, we just really started because we're only on chapter 3. Now, Genesis chapter 3, if you've read the chapter already, or if you're just familiar with the Bible, you might know that that is where the fall of man happens. That is where we see the serpent tricking Eve eating of the fruit that she was not supposed to eat of, and then giving it to Adam, and Adam himself eating of it. Interesting to note that Eve was deceived, but Adam willfully chose to eat of the fruit and disobey God. And then we see the results of that, and they're aware of their nakedness. They run, they hide, they try to cover themselves up. A great picture, not a great thing, but it's a great picture of man's weakness, man's inability to save himself. All right, Adam and Eve, when they realized their nakedness, their shamefulness, they try to cover themselves up with their own man-made garments, and they realized this isn't good enough, and they were ashamed when God came into their presence, that they ran away and they tried to hide. And we see at the end of the chapter that God himself takes it upon himself to cover them with the skins of the animals, and that was a good covering to hide their shamefulness from the public eye. And so that's a great picture of that. And if you're getting anything right now, and I know I'm speaking kind of quickly, forgive me, there's a lot of great lessons we could probably get out of this chapter alone. We see the first promise of the coming Messiah. I know we just got done celebrating Christmas, but we see here when God is talking to all three people, Satan, Adam, and Eve, we see the promise of, hey, there's going to come one from the seed of woman that will crush the head of the serpent, that will crush Satan. He will bruise his heel, but this Messiah will destroy Satan one day. And we see that promise of the Messiah, that great hope, even in the midst of the fallen man. But the one main thing that stood out to me, all right, this time through, and I'm sure if I read it again, something else different would stick out to me from this chapter. But the one thing that stood out to me in this chapter, this go around, is just the importance of knowing God's word. And I think this is a great lesson, thing to ponder, especially at the beginning of a new year. Everyone's making New Year's resolutions. I could afford to lose a couple of lbs. People make resolutions to read books more or read their Bible more. And I think that's a great point to bring up, especially with the coming of this new year. Get a new journal, or, be re-engaged in writing things down in your journal, being kind of renew that relationship with your accountability partner. Say, hey, we might have fallen off, we might have slacked the last couple of weeks with the holidays. Let's get back on it, telling each other what it is that we're getting out of God's word each and every day. Because we see in this chapter the importance of knowing God's word. One of the tactics that Satan uses immediately with Eve is try to get her to question God's word. Did God say that you cannot eat of all the trees? He's trying to get her to question God's word. But not only that, he tries to get her to question God's goodness. Now, Eve, she remembers what God says, but she kind of falters in that she does not quote God exactly. All right, I'm not saying you have to have God's word perfectly memorized in its entirety, but the main thing I want you to understand is that it's important for us to know God's word, to be reading God's word, to learn more of our great God. So when we face those situations, when Satan tries to tempt us to question God's word, when Satan tries to tempt us, or the world tries to tempt us to think that God is not as good to us as the world can be, when he tries to get us to question God's goodness, what will help us combat that temptation, what will help us overcome those obstacles of temptation to disobey God, is understanding who God is. And the best way we can understand who God is through the reading of his word. Know God's word. Take pride, take personal interest in your personal devotional life each and every day. All right, set aside time. It's going to take work to set aside time to read God's word. All right, and then tell somebody about that. Your accountability partner, your parents, your friends, your unsaved coworkers, or your unsaved friends at school, whatever the situation may be. Read God's word, know God's word to know your God better. All right, that means when you go to church, you're taking notes, you're paying attention. When you're in Sunday school or small group or whatever method that your church uses, that you're engaged, that you're not, and that's the whole point that I try to tell my teens with the journals and with taking notes, is to engage yourself in what it is that you're reading or partaking in, whether that's a service. All right, because the more you're engaged in it, the more you're going to get out of it, and then apply those things to your life. All right, because Satan and the world, like in this chapter, they're going to come at you. They're going to try to get you to question God's word. They're going to try to get you to question God's goodness. All right, and the best way to combat that is to know more about God, to grow in a relationship with Him. All right, take pride, take personal interest in your daily devotional walk. That's all I got for today's chapter, guys. We're going to continue right on, hopefully at a good, steady pace through the book of Genesis. Tomorrow with chapter 4. But other than that, tell somebody about your great God. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless.